Hi and welcome back. So we've been talking about evolution, the change in the allele and genotype frequencies in the population over time. We said that the smallest biological unit that can evolve is the population, and individual organisms do not evolve. Evolution, the theory of evolution, explains the diversity and unity of life. And yes, this theory is supported by scientific evidence such as molecular biology, biogeography, comparative anatomy. We can look at structures such as homologous structures and vestigial structures. We can also compare embryos, early developmental stages of organisms. And then we have a fossil record that serves as evidence of evolution, that the change has been happening. Evolution requires genetic variation, and genetic variation comes from mainly mutations, and then we have genetic and sexual recombination, as well as horizontal gene transfer. And we're going to define the mechanisms that drive the evolution. The main mechanism that drives the evolution would be natural selection. Another one would be artificial selection. That's on a smaller scale. And then we have sexual selection. So all of these three driving mechanisms are going to act on organisms' phenotype. So yes, the characteristics, the inherited characteristics are going to be important. So if we're talking about natural selection, remember we're discussing survival of the fittest. Do you have what it takes to be able to survive that given environment? And then we have a mechanism that happens by chance. So this is genetic drift, and genetic drift could be caused by one of the two factors here. We have a bottleneck effect and we have a founder effect. And then the last one we have here, gene flow and migration. We already discussed that it can give rise to genetic variation in populations. So what do we get as a result of evolution, that change in the allele and genotype frequencies? We get new species. We get speciation. This is how we get the divergence of that common ancestor into two different species or more. So speciation happens because of reproductive isolation. So what this means, species have diverged. They have accumulated so many mutations within their lineages that when you put them back together, they no longer reproduce and produce a fertile offspring. So it means they have become reproductively isolated. Reproductive isolation may happen because of one of the two reasons. There might be a geographical barrier that starts to separate the population, and we call that allopatric speciation. And then we have sympatric speciation, meaning you have a population, however, this population is starting to diverge, even though it's physically not separated, because of the occurrence of polyploidy. So we're talking about meiosis, producing gametes, and they have a varied number of chromosomes, and then the combinations of these chromosomes are resulting in combinations that produce these hybrids that can become their own lineage. And some organisms might actually develop very strong preferences for particular microhabitats or mating types and so on. So this general population starts to split up, starts to diverge because of all these internal processes, so to speak. What maintains divergence, meaning prevents hybridization, is basically two things. So we have prezygotic barriers that arise, and then we also have post-zygotic barriers. So when we discuss prezygotic barriers, we're talking about anything that can impede fertilization, meaning the sperm and the egg are not going to be coming together. So a few examples for prezygotic barriers would be habitat isolation, temporal isolation, behavioral, mechanical, anatomical isolation, and even gametic isolation, towards the sperm and the egg are no longer compatible. And then we have post-zygotic barriers. So this is where we have a hybrid that results from incomplete reproductive isolation. However, the hybrid is not going to be a very viable adult. So it will have reduced viability, it will have reduced fertility, and we can even observe what we call hybrid breakdown. So it means the hybrids are produced, however, they're selected against because they don't have a high success as far as surviving and reproducing. All right, and that will do it. Hope you're ready for the test.